No, I think probably, I think the major changes that have taken place on the national schedule, landscape that have influenced locally, centers are really good at raising money. And so the National Institutes of Child Health and Human Development have had a number of orientations over the last 20, 30 years that have shaped the field. I think there are two particularly important ones. One is interdisciplinarity. So the idea that demography centers ought to be in the Department of Sociology, which is what the atmosphere that I came of age in, that's gone. In other words, population centers have to be institutionally independent, not a subservient part of a academic discipline. So that has become, and I think that after my time, I mean, when I was a director in de facto, we were an interdisciplinary independent center. We raised more money, did more things across campus than any other unit, but nominally, administratively, we're still within the Department of Sociology. I didn't press to have university independence. But afterwards, I think Bob Plotnick and others sort of said, well, that's a logical extension, so it became that. The other thing is the union between demography and the health sciences. So now demography and the health sciences are kind of grown hand in foot. There was always people who, from the health sciences, and a lot of demographers studying health issues, particularly mortality and morbidity. But it's just there was so much more funding in the health sciences than there was any other branch of the social sciences that was demography adjacent. A lot of the center of gravity is shifted both nationally and locally to the health sciences, particularly public health, but lots of other areas as well. So the interdisciplinarity and I think the link to health sciences, both of which originated nationally, but it's certainly clearly reflected locally as well. I would like also to think the international, demography moving from a study of American society to study of the world, that had its day, but it's kind of contracted a little bit in recent years. And I could go on and on about that, but I think that's another issue. Graduate students and alumni, I think I think the center, this anniversary will sort of be a test of that. In other words, it's designed to bring back a lot of the PhDs and maybe some of the postdocs here who got their training, a generation ago, and to see what they have done with their careers. And if the center has been successful, they're all going to be thriving and they're going to be proud of their origins and how they've tried to take the University of Washington ideals that they learned here and how they've implemented them in their careers and their universities. So we'll wait and see. But I think that's a legacy of anything. Of course, there's all the stuff that's in the library too, all of the publications that people have done. But I think it's the living legacy of our alumni that should be the primary test of whether we've mattered.
I do think a foundational one was moving it out of sociology and beginning the broadening. It broadened with that very early recruiting initiative, but it just kept going. And it became such a vibrant place. And with all the software and, software consulting opportunities and the grant support, all the services, it brought in people who could fall under the broad umbrella of social demography, especially, and could benefit from it. So I know a bunch of folks from social work eventually became involved. More folks from public policy got involved, and say the public health folks and probably others that I don't even aware of. And as you mentioned, the fact that the external affiliates became such a major part of the center rather than just 5 or 6 of them. I think of it as one of the highlights of my career. I think of it as something I worked really hard at. It was sometimes exhausting because I was really split into, I had 2 masters, right? I had the arts and sciences and I had public policy. And public policy, I think, sometimes felt that they weren't getting their fair share of me because I had an office in CSDE and spent a lot of time there. So there were those kind of tensions. But I grew greatly intellectually. I made good friends and colleagues that I still like to see, and that's I think the legacy to me.
Well, from my perspective, again, given when I got there. I would say moving CSDE from a unit in the Department of Sociology to a freestanding unit in the Division of Arts and Sciences was really key. It's had exactly the impact that was intended, which is great. And I think we really want to acknowledge the foresight of the deans of that era. And I want to give a particular shout out to Susan Jeffords, who I think really had a good part of the vision for that. I would say it has a legacy of supporting nationally and globally recognized collaborative interdisciplinary research that makes contributions at every level from theoretical to applied.
My sense is I think the major thing that I've seen happen at CSDE is a really dramatic broadening of the scientific perspectives that CSDE incorporates. And so during my experience at CSDE, it's gone from being simply a group within the sociology department to being a really large center that incorporates public health, policy, social work, anthropology, the array of disciplinary perspectives that are incorporated in CSDE is really immense. And I think that has been mirrored at what's gone on in population centers around the country. And perhaps demography more broadly is a much bigger and more expansive and more diverse field than it used to be. Maybe the main direction in which it's moved is towards biology and health. I think the spatial aspect is sort of another, methodological issue that's been major. But I think that the expansion into public health, biological anthropology, and so on has been really remarkably distinctive, and I think has characterized demography more broadly as a field.
What changes? I'm not really sure. I mean, I think it's strong support from throughout the years, a strong commitment from the college to the center. And strategic decisions by the center in response to that support to demonstrate the centrality of what the services the center provides for a wide range of people, both faculty and graduate students, but also a wider community. There were certain decisions made before even CSDE moved into its current home in Wright Hall about leveraging student technology fee money to create servers that demographers, anybody who had a demographic interest, including students, and we got looser and looser about that to get more money over time, to create these, first of all, just only Windows-based terminal servers. That was a big decision made when Bob Plotnick was still chair, and it was pre-Matt Weatherford days. We had this real interest in creating a social science research infrastructure. I remember very much that when I came here from UCLA, the quality of computing infrastructure for social science research was appallingly bad. And people pointed to labs with desktop computers, or there were university IT or the equivalent thereof, where they had big mainframes. And there was nothing in between, even though it's possible to get these small servers and house them locally. And so we began this process of basically trying to create a poor man's version of UCLA's social science computing. I don't think anybody's ever really talked about this. That's what we did. And I can't remember the fellow's name who I worked with, who was basically in charge of CSD's computing at the time. But he put in grants and we got these first terminal servers. And it built from there. When Martina became director, She got Linux boxes, and we expanded the terminal servers, and CSD's computing became really, really good. And it's central to so many people's research now. And that has been that technology fee. It got to be so good. Nobody was noticing what we were doing at first, and we didn't talk about it because we thought somebody would, in the college or somebody else, would start to say something. We tried to fly under the radar, and at some point, the college started to notice and started to say, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, we need these resources for our research." We didn't talk about the way we were going to basically create this parallel computing infrastructure that was being provided at the university level. Anyway, that was a big thing, and I'm so grateful that at various moments when the college could have stepped in, various people didn't do stuff and stop us. They did provide support. They grumbled at the salaries we had to pay. They grumble about that still, I think, but we're now so big, it's never going to go away. Because if it went away, research would stop. So that is, I think I played a little part in that, in basically pushing, because of my experience at UCLA. Like, where is the computing infrastructure here? And once it started, and especially with Martina's push post Bob Plotnick, it just took off. There was a lot of skepticism from some established CSDE people at the time. Like, why are we doing this? Why do we need this? I mean, some of the more senior people, thinking that they could do everything they wanted to do on their desktop, or they would just, use some central university resource. They didn't realize the potential for building something superior to either of those that we controlled. And yeah, I mean, that was a big thing. And I'm glad the college, in a way, this is where UW's awful decentralization and chaotic decentralization actually paid off, in the sense that there was nobody to step in. We weren't stepping on anybody's toes. There was a big kind of wide open field in front of us, and at some point somebody started to notice, you're spending all this money on salaries and on infrastructure. You're winning the most awards from STF because you have the most compelling proposals, because you're adding the most value. At some point, the dean of research in social sciences, Primojeski, started saying, "What are you doing?" They started to notice, because basically we were becoming more powerful than they were. See, God, I'm not that old. I mean, your legacy. Well, I mean, fantastic research. I mean, the thing that the students, the trainees, the people have gone on to have incredible careers, who are very influential. There's that. I think about where we are truly, I think, one of the premier locations in the world for particular types of demographic research. The thing that it's really pushed me, statistical demography. I mean, and working with colleagues in that area in particular, the unfortunate loss of Emilio. I mean, Emilio taught me a lot. He's such a humble person, but also serving on committees of people doing statistical demography work, often with Adrian, but not exclusively Adrian as chair, Adrian Raftery, learning a lot about that. We're so influential in those areas, and continuing that, I think, is really important. So, and really how we've become so, from back in 2000, 2001, when we didn't have a center grant, we're now so prominent at PAAs. I mean, it's an incredible story, and it's a reflection of the work done in the center, that's for sure, and the successive directors, each building on the previous one. But it's also, I think, I have to say, despite all the grumbling that has come from the college, it's a reflection of college support. And I surely, surely hope that that continues even in this most difficult time we're in right now. And of course, I'm not even speaking about what happens at NIH, but it has been an incredible success story. So much so that colleagues of mine at other places have been, I'm mentioning UCLA and Penn State in particular. They say things like, how do you keep growing? You know, they even in a more well-funded institutional environment like University of California, I think we've done well relative to them. So I'm so proud of that. That is blood, sweat, and tears, but also it's money, and it's a sign of our collective success. I don't think it's any individual is responsible for that, and that we work well together. Not to say there haven't been difficult personalities, and so far everybody's managed to navigate those reasonably well without things falling apart, as they sometimes do in the academic world.